Well, I better make it good then. I'm good at speaking, so this better be good. It's great to see so many familiar faces. I've seen quite a few of you out at First at various times over the years. Some of you we like to call dual citizens who move back and forth between First and here at Capitol. And it's been a while, I think, since I've been here. We try to have sort of annual, what we call pulpit exchanges. But I think with the COVID pandemic, missed out on a few of those. But we're back in it now. Joy will be coming out to First on August 4th, and you have me here with you today. This is a kind of adjusted version of something I shared at First back in March. I'm going to take this off the stand just so it's easier for me for now. And it's really rooted in this amazing book, which I cannot commend to you highly enough. It's a book entitled Lost and Found by a woman named Catherine Scholes. It's a memoir of hers about the death of her father and finding new love, and it's about life. It's, as the subtitle says, reflections on grief, gratitude, and happiness. It's a fantastic book that was commended to me by a colleague who said, and I quote, "She's an evangelist for this book." And well, she should be. It's an amazing book. So this morning's reading comes from Lost and Found, and you'll hear another extended excerpt from it toward the end of the homily. Catherine Scholes' words. The world overflows with possibilities, with places to visit and things to learn and books to read and skills to master and people to meet and causes to champion and trajectories to pursue. But only a tiny fraction of them are available to each of us. As a result, although we all like to feel that we make choices about our life, much of what we do amounts to choosing against things, to making our peace with everything that we will never get to do. I love my life and wouldn't exchange it for any other, but I am not sure the faint contrails of longing left behind by all the other imagined futures ever fully disappear. That's not because some part of me still wonders who else I could have been. It is just a general mourning for the foreclosure of possibility. The poet Louise Gluck described this problem as, quote, metaphysical claustrophobia, the bleak fate of being always one person, end quote. Every other possible existence in Idaho or Honduras or Lahore, as a carpenter or baseball player or musical genius, as a sibling if we are an only child, or an only child if we are the youngest of 7, all of these variations on the human experience are unavailable to us. We have, unavoidably, only our one lifetime. And no matter how energetic or interested or fortunate or long-lived we may be, we can only do so much with it. And so much, against the backdrop of the universe, can seem so very little. That is the essential difficulty of our situation. Life goes on, but we do not. We stop. Perhaps the devout are right, and some part of us will endure beyond the grave, but either way, existence as we know it, falling in love, grieving, going to the grocery store, splashing in the ocean, driving at night with the music up and the windows down, in every detail, good and difficult, living out our days here among the egrets and herons and black bears and fleas, all of this ceases absolutely upon our death. That is the very essence of what it means to be mortal. Yet it is difficult to fully imagine, let alone accept. Our lives are literally everything to us. And they feel so brimming and momentous while we are living them that it is hard to grasp how fleeting they are compared to the whole of human history, to say nothing of the vast sweep of space and time. Here ends the reading. Read the book. It is beautifully written, if you can't tell already by that. My homily this morning is entitled, How Life Moves Us. Love and loss are frequent, unique, and fascinating counterparts. They uphold one another. They both serve to highlight meaning, to focus us on the why of existence. Why are we here? To love, to connect. And what is an unavoidable outcome of that loving? Loss. At memorial services, I often say to live is to love is to lose. And I imply, though I don't always say, and we wouldn't have it any other way. We would rather love and lose than go through a lifetime untouched, unreached. We want to love, and the consequence of that caring, that loving, is that when we lose, and make no mistake, it is when, not ever if, we will be bereft. We will be sad. We will grieve. And we will do more than that. I used to think of grief and loss as elements of life to be ignored as long as possible. Parts of living that should be acknowledged only in passing and only when one must. Loss was a reality, a part of living. I begrudgingly agreed, yes, but I would give it as little of my attention as possible. I would avoid it. You will not at all be surprised to learn that this is not a successful long-term strategy. In recent years, as the losses have piled up, and I think Melora and I lost at least 20 people from the beginning of the pandemic to this day, family, friends, mentors, not even to mention members of the first community. Grief became impossible to ignore. It became impossible to try to shove it aside. And then once I stopped moving away from grief, once I stopped trying to avoid it and instead did the opposite, leaned in, a miraculous thing happened. My whole sense of it transformed. Grief has become something I now deeply value and even appreciate. I don't know that I would say that I love grief, but I actually have made good companions with it over these last several years. In the past, I noticed whenever I preached about grief at First and elsewhere, or talked about loss, often someone would come up to me afterward and ask me not to spend too much time talking about sadness. There is already so much sadness in the world, they would say. The headlines are bleak enough. Don't speak so much about sadness, Shana. Talk about the good stuff. talk about happy things. But I've come to realize the thing is, this is that. Talking about grief and loss and sadness, yes, it's sad, but it's also the good stuff. It's in moments and in fits and in starts, even the happy stuff, too. I don't want to sound Pollyanna about it or overly naive, but I think there is lots of good to be found in embracing grief. It has become one of my greatest teachers. It's the reason I lean in now. It has helped me to appreciate my life more fully. It has pushed me to love more dearly the people that are still here with me, sharing in this life. Grief is hard and it is sad, and it is a clarifying force like none other. As Catherine Scholl says, it is, quote, a kind of external conscience, end quote. It reminds me in a way that nothing else does to savor my life, to focus on what and who matters, and to let go of all the rest, to let go of all the things that keep me from really living. I would guess that each of us gathered here this morning could tell many a powerful story about grief. Each of you, no doubt, and maybe you will at the forum, could tell me about people that you have loved and lost, and the legacy, the lessons that you are carrying around with you, along with those people who have now taken up residence in your being. Let me just share two such stories from my living and losing over these last several years. At the beginning of my cycle of grief and loss over these last several years, the person who began the cycle for me was a man by the name of David Petit. He was high up in Unitarian Universalism, worked for the UUA for multiple decades, and he died in September of 2020 at the age of 62 of cancer. I had been working closely with David for years. I'd flown to Boston to serve on a committee 3 times a year, and I would see David at each one of these meetings. In fact, I'd heard from him in September about his growing ill health and unsureness and uncertainty about what was going on, only to find out later that he was dying of cancer. After he died, I showed up at an online memorial service for him and was surprised to find myself weeping through the entire 2-hour service. As I had tuned in, I thought, I don't even know David that well. He's just a professional colleague. But one of the things I learned from David's death is that we don't get to compartmentalize grief. Our heart doesn't know, oh, it's just a professional colleague. Little did I know that I couldn't confine my love or my care for him. I couldn't put it in a box. I couldn't keep that impact that he had had on my life and my love for him in a small space. David had come to mean a great deal to me. I loved him. And I didn't realize that until after he was gone. David was a huge birder. He traveled all over the world to see particular birds. We would be at meetings and he'd pull up his screen and say, look, I just went to Florida to see this. And he'd tell me all about this bird. He saw over 700 different species of birds in his lifetime. And so now, when there's a bird outside my window, and I don't know what it is, I'm not sure what it's there to tell me, I say, hello, David. What kind of bird are you? What do you have to tell me today? Last year, in June, I was on sabbatical, and I went back to Washington, D.C. to the congregation that I had served as associate minister for 7 years. I was walking up the steps of the church, and there was Judy Lieber, longtime member of that congregation who had served on a committee with me, who had been a very important part of that community, and I gave her a huge hug. We were delighted to see each other, to spend a little bit of time together. And little was I to know that 3 months later, she would be gone. Judy had helped perhaps one of the most significant moments in my ministry in DC happen. She had coordinated a pilgrimage journey to the Camino de Santiago in Spain. And Judy was one of only 15 people who spent 10 days with me, sweating and cursing and walking our way through the Spanish and Portuguese countryside. Judy had seen me through formative years in my ministry and in my life. She had quite literally journeyed with me in ways that no one else had. And there she was, and now she's gone. I can still hear her distinctive voice, a bit of an Oklahoma twang mixed with years of living in Washington, D.C. Her energy, her verve for life. I attended her memorial service online just a few months ago and was reminded of why she was so important to me. Toward the end of her service, someone stood up and said, Judy was someone who quintessentially believed that life is about experiences, not things. And that the best of all is to experience things with people you love. Indeed. Amen to that, Judy. Toward the very end of Lost and Found, Catherine Scholes writes, "This is all we have, this moment with the world. It will not last because nothing lasts. The entire plan of the universe consists of losing, and no matter how much we find along the way, life amounts to a reverse savings account in which we are eventually robbed of everything. Our dreams and plans and jobs and knees and backs and memories, the keys to the house, the keys to the car, the keys to the kingdom itself. Sooner or later, all of it drifts into the valley of lost things. Time, in carrying on, will carry almost all of what we know of life away. Nothing about this is strange or surprising. It is the fundamental, unalterable nature of things. The astonishment is all in the being here. It is the turtle in the pond, the thought in the mind, the falling star, the stranger on Main Street. To all of this, loss, which seems only to take away, adds its own kind of necessary contribution. No matter what goes missing, the object you need or the person you love, the lessons are always the same. Disappearance reminds us to notice, transience to cherish, fragility to defend. Loss is a kind of external conscience, urging us to make better use of our finite days. Our crossing is a brief one. We are here to keep watch, not to keep. That's the closing line of the book. I'm not giving anything away. We are here to keep watch, not to keep. So how well are you keeping watch? Are you watching the right things? It is so very easy to get distracted, to get caught up in the inconsequential, to forget to make the most of the limited time that we have to be alive. So may we, each of us, find a way to make the most of our days. May we find a way to love and appreciate those we encounter along life's path. May we find moments to savor. So may it be, for however many days of life we are blessed with. Blessed be, and amen.